people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. The official word from MVP now that Erica Cruz is out of the running for that Amanda Serrano fight early next year due to an atypical finding in Erica Cruz's pre-fight VADA testing. The original bout will not move forward. Stepping in is undefeated contender Reina Tellez, and the stakes remain the same. Amanda Serrano returns home to Puerto Rico to defend her unified WBA and WBO featherweight titles, now against a hungry new challenger in a 10-round championship fight contested under men's rules for 3-minute rounds. It's important to note that neither the WBO or the WBA take the hardline stance that the World Boxing Council does when it comes to 3-minute rounds in a women's fight. The official word from Amanda Serrano herself was, to all my fans, the change of opponent came from a VADA atypical finding of clenbuterol in Erica Cruz's test. Having taken a bunch of VADA tests myself in preparation for my biggest fights, all three versus Katie Taylor versus Heather Hardy, my manager requested it because of Erica's previous test failure and title stripping. When the finding came up, he decided it was best to move forward and not wait around with 3 weeks for further testing and risk losing the fight. The new opponent, in our opinion, is a riskier fight. Tellez is a young, hungry, experienced fighter, which I happen to be a fan of both her and her sister Gabriella. At this stage of my career, I'm looking to give others opportunities, and she totally deserves and earned it. I was her once. Her and her sister remind me of me and Cindy. We will both give it our all, and at the end, the fans will win. My team just wanted fairness and no foul play like we've always offered. Tune in January 3rd. I think we're all a little bit tired of hearing Mexican fighters use tainted meat as an excuse for when they pop hot. That's what Erica and her team tried to tell Amanda, except there was no prior investigation for them to rush to that conclusion. And given that Erica already tested positive for a banned substance, which costed her her alphabet title, nobody's buying that same old bullshit. Oh, blame it on the tainted meat again. The tainted meat. The token tainted meat south of the border. Give me a break. Enter 22-year-old unbeaten Reina Tellez, an orthodox fighter to Amanda Serrano, who is a southpaw and taller by a few inches. I've seen Reina, and she's actually very good. You might have seen her too on the undercard of some MVP shows. She's fighting Amanda in what is a big step up for her. Amanda Serrano sports a professional record of 47 wins with 4 losses and 1 draw, 31 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 52 professional bouts, to young Reina Tellez, who sports an unbeaten record of 13 wins with no losses and 1 draw, 5 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 14 professional bouts. Last in action in September of this year opposite the ring, Mayela Perez, who she decisioned over 8 rounds in what was her second fight of this year. Her first was against Maria Salinas in June. She fought Mayela in September. Now she's fighting Amanda early next year with no ring rust to shake off. Whereas Amanda is coming off the loss to Katie Taylor in July, which turned out to be her only fight this entire calendar year. Coming off of those 2 consecutive losses to Katie Taylor in November of last year and July of this one, what's immediately noticeable is that Amanda Serrano is many times more experienced a fighter than young Reina Tellez. In truth, Amanda is more experienced than most fighters that are out there. The question is, at what point is that experience too much experience? She is 37 years old. She is coming off of 2 consecutive losses. A fighter like Reina has everything to gain and really nothing to lose, save her which, in light of who she's fighting, is a victimless crime. No one would hold it against Reina Tellez if she goes in there and loses to Amanda Serrano, but does that make her more dangerous or less dangerous? I like the fight. I like the opponent choice. As stated, I've seen Reina Tellez in action before, and she's solid. Hard puncher, mid-range to inside fighter. A fight between her and Amanda makes for an all-action shootout, which is what the Erica Cruz fight was supposed to be. Very similar build, similar sweet spot to Erica Cruz, so stylistically, it's a very similar fight. And we'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches and we give Reina Tellez an even closer look.
I think that Terence is just one of the greatest fighters of our generation. Phenomenal talent that could have beaten so many more fighters of our generation if he would have got those fights and if he would have, been able to been in more mega fights. But walking away on your own terms is always great. When you're at the top, like walking away when you've been beaten a few times, it kind of like, it's not the same vibe. And I think leaving at the top is a really cool thing to do. Like Terence had a lot of good wins, but he never really got the fights consistently that he deserved, and he would have won those fights because he was that good. But he's still a general. Like, you can put him in the conversations, in my opinion, with Floyd, with Leonard, with all those guys. So let's just as fight fans, let's just appreciate Floyd Mayweather, appreciate Terence Crawford, and know that if they would have met in their prime, what a fight it would have been.
I mean, I agree with that. In terms of the all-time great fighters, you could put Terence in that conversation with Leonard, with Floyd. It's just a question of where you want to rank them. That's when it becomes a contentious subject. But he's definitely in that conversation. Somewhat of a tragic figure, Terence Crawford, that so many of his best years and his prime years were years where he was frozen out of the big fights. The Errol Spence Jr. fight should have never took that long. Imagine if it hadn't, and he would have had fights with Keith Thurman, with Danny Garcia, putting on performances just like the one that he put on against Errol Spence Jr. How much more would that have added to his marquee value and his resume? I suppose that in beating Errol the way that he did, he made up for it, making up for lost time, because Errol was the best of the PBC welterweights and Terence wiped his ass with Errol. Errol beat Danny Garcia, he beat Yordenis Ugas, Sean Porter, and Terence beat him. What about Keefy? Keith Thurman made a decision to stop being a relevant fighter a long time ago, so whatever fights he didn't have, that's really on him, because Terence Crawford and Top Rank actually did make a play for a Keith Thurman fight circa 2019, and Keith said he wasn't interested. He was more interested in losing to a 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao. Back over to Terence, there is a feeling that there was some lost time there. That just imagine if the Spence fight wouldn't have taken 4 or 5 years to make. If it would have happened sooner, Terence may have moved up sooner. Maybe had a grudge match with a Jermel Charlo for Undisputed before moving up to super middleweight, before fighting a Canelo Alvarez. That there was more that could have happened, though if it didn't, it's not on Terence. A lot of the delay was due to side of the street politics. At least that was the cover story, according to Errol Spence Jr., who claimed that Terence was on the wrong side of the street. What, the same side of the street as Tyson Fury? The PBC didn't have a problem making 2 fights with him, but they did have a problem making a fight with Terence. Ultimately, hindsight is 2020, and what you saw play out in the Spence versus Crawford fight is the reason they sandbagged it, is the reason they never really wanted to make that fight, and Errol Spence Jr. only had it as a last resort. Took him long enough. But in doing so, he showed some semblance of honor and, in effect, allowed Terence to make up for lost time. For all the fights that he didn't have with those PBC welterweights, he made up for it by annihilating Errol Spence Jr.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, you never know the background to these things, Is it part of a wider negotiation? That's just me knowing the game. Are there lingering injuries, which might be more likely, where every camp, what's he, 38 years old, 39? Like, every camp gets very, very hard. For the boxing world, and even for fight fans, it's not frustrating because it's his decision, but he's now reached that superstar status. You kind of want him to keep going, and it wasn't like his performance against Canelo showed signs of aging or anything like that, but he's also made a lot of money. What a time to bow out on top. A lot of fighters have one too many. So maybe he feels like the way my body is, maybe I'll get beat, and I don't need to get beat. I've got everything I've got. Or maybe he had a contract to fight someone else, but if he retires, he's not in that contract anymore, or it will give him greater leverage to negotiate a deal. That's just me being devious, which is part of my job. But it all depends on his body. I mean, that, you know, I wasn't being facetious before, but like, you never know the landscape of this, but more likely he's thought this is a good time to bow out, or got a few niggles and I don't think I should fight him. But if physically he's able, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. So his IQ's on another level, but what is there to do? Like, he's not going to want to go and fight, I don't know, Jaron Ennis. Like, he's going to look at that and go, well, I'm going to fight a 28-year-old coming through, I'm giving you my legacy. Do you know what I mean? So I think bowing out at the top like that's pretty cool thing to do.
Do you ever see Canelo, Diego Pacheco next?
Sorry?
Entertaining all of those different scenarios, not dissimilar from what we do here on the channel, Eddie Hearn attempts to quantify why would Terence Crawford now decide to retire at the height of his popularity, seemingly at the peak of his powers, when he didn't look old against Canelo Alvarez. He looked like he had a lot more to give, and the rumor was that afterwards he was going to move down to middleweight, maybe fight Yanni Beck-Elimkanalai. It was veteran boxing scribe Stephen Kimothy who suggested Yanni Beck popping hot and potentially getting stripped affected Terence's decision to either stick around or not stick around. So maybe if Yanni Beck would have had that Lara fight and won that Lara fight, Terence would have fought him afterwards. But now that that's off the table, Terence is out of the running. Not that fighting Yanni Beck-Elimkanalai and beating him would have held a candle to his win over Canelo anyway. In truth, perhaps we're all overthinking it. Terence Crawford is 38, going on 39 years old. More accomplished than most professional boxers aspire to be. More accomplished than most professional boxers are at the time of their retirement. A 5-weight, 4-time lineal, 4-time Ring Magazine, 3-time undisputed champion. For a guy like that in his late 30s, there really isn't much reason to stick around. And the money. I believe that Terence Crawford is better with money than most professional boxers because he doesn't buy all the gaudy jewelry and expensive toys you see most other professional athletes purchase with their earnings. Terence Crawford seems to live quite modestly in spite of all the millions of dollars he would have made at Top Rank and the millions more that he made in his last 3 or 4 fights. Remember, he was reported to have made $10 million for David Avanesian, over 20 for Errol Spence Jr., and whatever Turkey LL Sheik paid him for the Madrimov fight, not even counting his biggest payday with Canelo Alvarez. When you add it all up, that is more than enough money to retire on. Having recently sat down with Forbes, who reports he owns an estimated nearly 80 properties, both residential and commercial, spread across Omaha, Kansas City, and Colorado Springs. Taking all that into account, that is more than enough residual revenue in tandem with his fight purses for him to retire on, and at 38, he's still young enough to really enjoy the fruits of his labor, enjoy that money, though old enough that maybe he should bow out. This is professional boxing after all. It's a young man's game. The old saying goes, better to bow out early than to retire too late. That's the way things are in this sport. Leaving on his own terms with his health and his bank account intact. I think a lot of people are overthinking it. Doesn't have to be a conspiracy, doesn't have to be a murder mystery. I think this was the ideal time for Terence Crawford to call it a career. There just wasn't much left to do. Which allows us to segue to what is fast becoming one of the more popular segments here on the channel, Ring IQ Hate Mail. A lot of people didn't take kindly to my evaluation of Oscar De La Hoya's career versus Terence Crawford. Given that Oscar had some choice words for Terence, I felt that warranted a cross comparison, to which the Best Boxing News responded, let's be fair, Shane was on Peds, Oscar beat Tito. No, he didn't. Bernard Hopkins is better than Canelo. No, he isn't. Let's backtrack a little bit. Let's talk about the Tito Trinidad fight. Many people will tell you that Oscar should have won, but he sort of gave the fight away towards the end, circling away from Tito instead of engaging more. But whatever the case, still a loss in the column. It's still something that you at the Best Boxing News have to argue about, where I don't have to argue about who won Spence versus Crawford. I don't have to argue about Spence versus Canelo. Those were clear-cut and decisive victories, which De La Hoya versus Trinidad was not. That's why you have to keep arguing all these years later. And Bernard Hopkins being better than Canelo? Better at what? He's not a more accomplished fighter than Canelo Alvarez. Bernard was only a champion at 2 weights. Canelo Alvarez has been a champion in 4, unified in 1 and undisputed in another, having beaten more world champions for more world titles than Bernard Hopkins. So if Bernard is supposed to be better than Canelo, I don't know at what, all of which is besides the point anyway, because I only brought up the Hopkins fight to highlight how De La Hoya tried to become a middleweight champion and got stopped in 9 rounds, where Terence Crawford became undisputed at super middle. I'm only highlighting that Oscar and Terence more or less tried to do the same thing, but Terence actually did it. Terence actually succeeded. So for Oscar to try to look down on him, he's got a lot of fucking nerve. Most of Oscar's high-profile fights are fights that he lost. That's just reality. And because you want to make an excuse for every single one of those losses, that's not any semblance of fairness. That's loser talk. Misael said Manny was 29 when he beat Oscar. Crawford is 38. But Canelo is older even though he's 35.
What?
Crawford looks young in the ring, which still leaves fans wanting to see more from him now that he isn't frozen out and has the financial backing of one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Yeah, listen, buddy, I'm not for the mental gymnastics. Crawford is 38 going on 39 years old. You understand that? He is literally older now than Oscar De La Hoya was when he lost to Manny Pacquiao, when he lost to Floyd Mayweather. Focus. The point that I was making is that Oscar ended his career off a loss. He was retired by the sport of boxing. He didn't retire from it. He didn't do it on his own terms, like Terence Crawford, and that was the point. That before Oscar De La Hoya decides to criticize that guy's career, look at how yours ended. And I don't actually think that's lost on a lot of people so much as they try to devise it in their own minds, where you can still rate Oscar above a Crawford, even though Oscar has more career blemishes and less accomplishments. If you had to ask someone, whose career would you rather have? How would you prefer your boxing career go? Do you prefer it go like Terence's or go out sad like Oscar did? You know what most boxers are gonna say, what most people are gonna say, but because there's a vocal minority that wants to view Oscar. Oscar is not actually on par with Terence Crawford in any facet. Now, Oscar was accomplished in his own right and very popular in his time. One of the solid fighters of his era. Though not so solid that he can talk shit about Terence Crawford. Buddy, you lost too many fucking fights. You got beat too many times, knocked out too many times to talk that kind of shit. And that's what I was pointing out. The reality of Oscar De La Hoya's career. That he had a lot of high-profile fights, most of which he lost. If you try to put Terence Crawford's career under a harsh light, under a microscope, we could do the same thing to you. And when we do it, you've got a lot more blemishes on your CV than he does on his. That was the point. But you guys already knew that.